he has staked his foreign policy legacy on what happens in Ukraine and now Israel, Gaza. The need for the United States to continue to fund this has been, as he put it, part of this global fight to save democracy. And so the United States can't walk away. It would be catastrophic in both those cases. So he's got to make sure that gets done. And the Republicans are holding it a little bit hostage here with this, with these immigration demands. Add to that the political reality that not Republican voters, but swing voters have some concerns about the situation at the border. He does need to worry about a Republican drumbeat in running up to November, that he had an opportunity to do something about the border and walked away from it because he cared more about Ukraine. This is a way he can actually not get everything that folks on the left want with immigration, and in fact, a lot of things they don't want, but he can address that issue, get what he needs in Ukraine and Israel, Gaza, continue to hammer those Republicans on abortion and other issues heading into the election, and then hopefully with a Democratic Congress next year, maybe go back and take another shot at the Dreamers, which Republicans just don't seem that interested in dealing with.
Yeah, it's with Dreamers specifically, I mean, who have been waiting, of course, a long time for any kind of legislation, and that is not even on the table in this legislation. But Carlos, in your state of Florida, we've seen what happens when immigrants are targeted. Governor DeSantis's anti-immigrant laws that went into effect this summer drove workers out of the state in fear of being racially profiled and deported. Why is it so difficult for some Republicans to see the economic benefits of immigration when they talk about border policy?
Yeah, this is the big shame in all of this, that, of course, we do need to take action to fix the situation at southwest border, because it's not sustainable for thousands and thousands of people to come through every day. But we know that the solutions to immigration go way beyond more border security. Of course, we have to make investments in the Americas to make sure we build economies in those countries, or help economies develop in those countries that give people hope and opportunity and security and safety, and of course create export markets for our own products. But we also need to find a way to treat with dignity and with humanity the people who are here. And of course, first and foremost, I dedicate a lot of time to this in Congress, is trying to find a permanent solution for Dreamers, young Americans, and I call them Americans because that's what they are, who don't have permanent status in this country. And that's just unacceptable. And I do think that Republicans, if they're going to get some wins on border security, should be willing to also give the immigrant community, especially Dreamers, some wins so that we can actually build an immigration system that makes sense for our economy, for our country, and that treats people with dignity and respect.
Absolutely. And Mo, how do Democrats strike this balance? How do they message on immigration in ways that address the issue but keep humanity in focus as well?
Well, and I think that's the key, right? They can't turn a blind eye to voter concerns about the border and tell them that it's not an issue. That I challenge anyone to point to me a successful political campaign that tells tells voters that what they're seeing and feeling isn't real. There's a real political issue here. People are concerned about it. And so they've got to show that they take it seriously, that they take border security seriously. The dirty secret is the Biden administration and Democrats have continuously put border security measures on the table that Republicans have killed because the Republicans didn't like some of the other things that Democrats put in it. So there is a way to fight fire with fire here. Republicans have voted against every single Democratic border security measure that has been out there. And Democrats can lean into, I think, the points that the congressman was just making about Dreamers, about these immigrants who are not just, there's not just a human element here. For those that aren't concerned about that, there's an economic argument to be made for letting them in. Our economy is stronger when immigrants are a vibrant part of it. So I think there's a way for Democrats to actually be on offense on this a bit, maybe a little bit more than they have been.